If love was promised at marriage, then why does it sometimes escape the same home it was born in? Stay till the end because the answer might change how you see relationships forever. Love does not disappear all at once. It erodes slowly when emotional needs go unseen and unmet. At the beginning of a relationship, attention flows naturally. Partners listen closely, respond with care, and make each other feel significant. Over time, however, familiarity replaces curiosity. Daily responsibilities take priority, conversations become practical rather than personal, and emotional check ins quietly stop happening. When a person repeatedly shares their feelings and receives indifference in return, the heart begins to withdraw as a form of self protection. This withdrawal is rarely dramatic, it is subtle, almost invisible, but deeply damaging. Love thrives on being acknowledged, and when acknowledgement disappears, love slowly loses its voice. Emotional needs are not luxuries. They are the foundation of emotional security. Feeling heard, appreciated, valued, and emotionally safe creates attachment and trust. When these needs are ignored, a person begins to feel alone even while sharing the same space. They may still fulfill their role as a spouse or partner, but emotionally they feel disconnected. The absence of empathy can be more painful than open conflict because it communicates that one's inner world no longer matters. Silence in response to emotional expression teaches a person to stop sharing. And once sharing stops, intimacy quietly collapses. Many relationships confuse physical presence with emotional presence. Being in the same room does not mean being emotionally available. When one partner consistently dismisses feelings, minimizes concerns, or avoids emotional conversations, the other partner internalizes a painful message. My emotions are a burden. Over time, this belief reshapes behavior. They speak less, ask for less, and expect less, not because they no longer care, but because caring has become unsafe. Love cannot survive in an environment where emotional expression feels risky or pointless. Ignoring emotional needs also creates resentment that rarely gets expressed directly. Instead of confrontation, people choose silence, hoping things will improve on their own. But unspoken disappointment does not disappear, it accumulates. Each ignored feeling becomes emotional weight, making closeness feel heavy rather than comforting. Resentment builds distance, and distance weakens emotional attachment. What once felt like home begins to feel like emotional isolation, and love struggles to exist where emotional safety no longer lives. When emotional needs are neglected, individuals often question their own worth. They wonder whether they are asking for too much or whether their feelings are unreasonable. This self doubt deepens emotional disconnection because a person who doubts their emotional value stops advocating for themselves. Love requires mutual emotional responsibility, and when one partner carries all the emotional weight while the other remains disengaged, imbalance becomes inevitable. Love cannot grow in imbalance, it withers under it. The fading of love is not caused by lack of commitment, but by lack of emotional responsiveness. Relationships fail not because partners stop loving, but because they stop nurturing the emotional bond that sustains love. Emotional needs ignored today become emotional distance tomorrow, and emotional distance eventually transforms love into obligation, routine, or silence. Emotional connection forms the core of lasting attraction, while physical attraction often acts as the initial spark. Physical appearance can draw two people together, but it cannot hold them together when life becomes demanding, unpredictable, or painful. Emotional connection is what allows two individuals to feel safe with one another beyond surface level desire. It is built through understanding, empathy, and consistent emotional presence. When someone feels emotionally connected, they experience a sense of being seen and accepted without the need to perform or impress. This depth of connection creates a bond that physical attraction alone is incapable of sustaining over time. Physical attraction is heavily influenced by novelty and perception, which naturally fluctuate. Emotional connection, however, grows stronger through shared experiences, vulnerability, and mutual support. When partners emotionally connect, they develop a sense of trust that allows them to express their fears, insecurities, and hopes without judgment. This emotional safety strengthens attachment, making the relationship resilient during moments of stress or conflict. Without emotional connection, physical attraction can quickly feel hollow, leaving individuals feeling lonely despite being physically close. Emotional connection also shapes how partners perceive one another physically. When emotional intimacy is strong, physical attraction often deepens, even if appearances change over time. Aging, stress, and life responsibilities may alter physical traits, but emotional bonding creates a lens of appreciation that goes beyond looks. A partner who feels emotionally understood often becomes more attractive because the bond is rooted in familiarity, shared history, and emotional reliability. Physical attraction fades more easily when emotional intimacy is absent because there is no deeper attachment anchoring desire. Relationships that prioritize physical attraction without emotional depth often struggle with inconsistency and insecurity. Physical desire can be easily influenced by external comparisons, attention from others, or changing circumstances. Emotional connection, on the other hand, creates stability. It fosters loyalty, not through obligation, but through emotional fulfillment. When someone feels emotionally satisfied in a relationship, the need for external validation decreases. Emotional fulfillment creates contentment, which protects the relationship from distractions and temptations. A lack of emotional connection can cause partners to feel misunderstood or emotionally invisible. Even frequent physical intimacy cannot compensate for the absence of emotional closeness. When emotional needs remain unmet, physical affection may start to feel mechanical or empty. Over time, this disconnect can create emotional exhaustion, leading individuals to withdraw or seek emotional understanding elsewhere. Emotional connection provides meaning to physical closeness, turning it into an expression of trust and affection rather than routine behavior. Emotional connection requires effort, presence, and emotional intelligence. It involves listening with intent, responding with empathy, and recognizing a partner's emotional signals. Unlike physical attraction, which can exist without conscious effort, emotional bonding must be nurtured consistently. When partners invest in emotional understanding, the relationship becomes a space of comfort rather than performance. Physical attraction may capture attention, but emotional connection holds the heart, shaping how love is experienced and sustained through time. Routine brings structure and predictability to a relationship, but when it exists without conscious effort, it slowly creates emotional distance between partners. In the early stages of love, effort feels natural and effortless because curiosity and excitement are high. Over time, however, routine begins to replace intentional connection. Conversations revolve around schedules, responsibilities, and logistics rather than feelings, dreams, or emotional experiences. When effort disappears, routine turns from comfort into emotional monotony, and monotony quietly erodes intimacy. Effort is what keeps emotional presence alive within routine. Without it, partners begin to assume rather than engage. They assume understanding instead of asking, assume love instead of expressing it, and assume presence instead of offering attention. These assumptions create emotional gaps that widen with time. When one partner stops actively choosing the other, emotional closeness weakens. The relationship continues to function, but it no longer feels alive. Emotional distance grows not because of conflict, but because of neglect. Routine without effort also diminishes emotional responsiveness. When partners become emotionally predictable, they stop noticing changes in each other's emotional states. A bad day goes unnoticed, emotional withdrawal is ignored, and subtle requests for reassurance are missed. Over time, this lack of emotional awareness makes one or both partners feel unseen. Feeling unseen creates loneliness, even within a committed relationship. Emotional distance forms when presence becomes habitual rather than intentional. When effort fades, appreciation often disappears with it. Small gestures that once communicated care are replaced by expectations. Gratitude becomes rare, and emotional validation becomes conditional. This absence of appreciation sends a silent message that the relationship is being taken for granted. Feeling taken for granted reduces emotional investment as people naturally pull back when they feel unvalued. Routine without acknowledgement creates emotional imbalance where one partner may continue to give while the other remains emotionally passive. Emotional distance also increases when routine eliminates novelty and emotional curiosity. Partners stop asking meaningful questions and stop exploring each other's inner worlds. Personal growth, emotional struggles, and evolving needs go unnoticed. Without emotional curiosity, partners drift apart mentally and emotionally, even while sharing the same daily life. Routine becomes a barrier rather than a foundation, preventing deeper connection from developing. Effort is the emotional energy that keeps routine from becoming stagnation. When partners consciously invest in emotional presence, routine becomes a shared rhythm rather than emotional confinement. Without that effort, routine creates emotional silence, where needs remain unspoken and connection feels distant. Emotional distance does not arrive suddenly. It builds quietly when routine replaces intention and familiarity replaces emotional engagement. Unresolved resentment does not remain confined to the moment it was created. It settles into the emotional foundation of a relationship and slowly reshapes how partners feel, think, and respond to one another. When disappointments, hurt feelings, or unmet expectations are ignored rather than addressed, they do not disappear. Instead, they accumulate quietly, turning into emotional weight that influences every interaction. Each unresolved issue becomes a reminder of being unheard or unvalued, and over time, this silent buildup weakens emotional trust and connection. Resentment often develops when one partner repeatedly compromises, suppresses emotions, or tolerates behavior that causes discomfort. At first, silence may feel like peacekeeping, but emotionally, it becomes self betrayal. The person carrying resentment begins to feel emotionally alone as their inner experience is no longer shared or validated. This emotional isolation creates vulnerability because humans naturally seek understanding and relief from emotional discomfort. When resentment is left unspoken, the need for emotional validation grows stronger, making individuals more susceptible to external emotional connections. Emotional vulnerability increases when resentment disrupts emotional safety within the relationship. Instead of seeing their partner as a source of comfort, individuals begin to associate them with frustration or disappointment. Emotional walls are built to protect against further hurt. But these walls also block intimacy. While the relationship may continue outwardly, Emotionally, it becomes fragile. A person who feels emotionally unsupported becomes vulnerable to anyone who offers empathy, attention, or understanding, even unintentionally. Unresolved resentment also alters perception. Small behaviors become triggers, and neutral interactions are interpreted negatively. This emotional sensitivity increases vulnerability because it heightens emotional reactivity and reduces emotional stability. When resentment colors perception, individuals feel misunderstood more easily and validated less often. The emotional hunger created by this dynamic makes external validation feel unusually powerful because it fills an emotional gap that has been ignored for too long. When resentment remains unresolved, communication deteriorates. People stop expressing needs clearly because they believe it will not make a difference. This silence creates emotional invisibility, where one partner feels unseen and emotionally irrelevant. Emotional vulnerability emerges when individuals feel they no longer matter emotionally to their partner. This sense of emotional neglect lowers emotional defenses and increases the likelihood of forming emotional bonds elsewhere, not out of intention, but out of emotional necessity. Resentment is dangerous because it operates silently. Unlike conflict, which creates opportunities for resolution, resentment festers without confrontation. It weakens emotional boundaries by creating longing for emotional relief. A person carrying unresolved resentment is emotionally exposed, seeking peace, understanding, and emotional safety. Emotional vulnerability grows not from desire for betrayal, but from the need to feel emotionally whole again. People rarely look outside their relationships because they want to replace their partner. They look because they want to be understood. The human need for understanding is deeply emotional and fundamental to connection. Feeling understood means feeling seen, validated, and emotionally acknowledged without having to explain or defend one's inner experience. When this need is unmet within a relationship, emotional dissatisfaction begins to grow, even if love and commitment still exist. The absence of understanding creates emotional loneliness, which can feel more painful than physical separation. Understanding involves more than listening to words. It requires emotional attunement. When a partner consistently dismisses feelings, minimizes concerns, or responds defensively, the message received is not disagreement, but emotional rejection. Over time, individuals stop expressing themselves because the effort feels futile. This silence does not indicate contentment, it reflects emotional exhaustion. When someone finally encounters another person who listens without judgment and responds with empathy, it creates emotional relief rather than romantic intention. The connection forms because the emotional need to be understood is finally being met. People who feel emotionally misunderstood often carry unresolved emotional tension. They may question their own emotional validity, wondering whether their needs are excessive or unreasonable. This self doubt deepens emotional isolation, making understanding feel even more essential. When someone provides emotional clarity and reassurance, it feels stabilizing rather than seductive. The bond that forms is rooted in emotional safety, not replacement. It is about being emotionally recognized, not about finding someone new. Replacement implies dissatisfaction with the partner's identity, but emotional seeking is usually dissatisfaction with emotional interaction. Many individuals still love their partners deeply while feeling emotionally disconnected from them. Love does not prevent emotional deprivation. When understanding disappears from a relationship, emotional hunger increases. This hunger makes emotional connection elsewhere feel intense because it satisfies a neglected need. The individual is not seeking to erase their partner, they are seeking emotional grounding. Understanding also restores a sense of emotional identity. When people feel understood, they feel aligned with themselves. They feel less confused, less alone, and more emotionally balanced. In contrast, emotional misunderstanding creates internal conflict, where individuals feel emotionally misplaced even within their own relationship. When another person mirrors their emotions accurately, it brings clarity and emotional relief. This relief can be mistaken for attraction, when in reality it is the comfort of emotional validation. The danger of emotional misunderstanding is that it slowly shifts emotional loyalty, not because of intention, but because emotional connection naturally follows emotional safety. When understanding is absent, people do not immediately leave, they endure. But endurance without emotional recognition weakens attachment over time. People seek understanding because it restores emotional dignity, reduces emotional strain, and reaffirms their inner experience, making it one of the most powerful emotional needs in human relationships. Marriage is not sustained by the wedding vows alone. It is sustained by the ongoing emotional care that follows them. Emotional maintenance is the continuous process of staying emotionally present, responsive, and engaged with a partner's inner world. In the beginning, emotional connection often feels automatic because attention, curiosity, and effort come naturally. Over time, however, life responsibilities, stress, and routine begin to compete with emotional intimacy. Without deliberate emotional maintenance, the emotional bond weakens, not because love is gone, but because it is no longer being actively nurtured. Emotional maintenance involves recognizing that emotional needs evolve. What once felt sufficient may no longer meet a partner's emotional expectations as circumstances change. Marriage requires adaptability, emotional awareness, and willingness to adjust. When partners assume emotional needs remain static, they unintentionally neglect growth. This neglect creates emotional gaps where one partner feels emotionally behind or disconnected. Continuous emotional maintenance bridges these gaps by encouraging open dialogue, emotional curiosity, and consistent reassurance. Neglecting emotional maintenance often results in emotional drift rather than immediate conflict. Partners may coexist peacefully while feeling emotionally distant. This emotional distance is dangerous because it often goes unnoticed until it becomes deeply ingrained. Emotional maintenance requires intentional effort to check in emotionally, to ask meaningful questions, and to notice emotional shifts. These acts communicate emotional investment and reinforce the sense of partnership. Without them, emotional presence fades, leaving the relationship vulnerable to misunderstanding and detachment. Emotional maintenance also requires emotional accountability. It involves taking responsibility for how actions, words, and silence affect a partner emotionally. When emotional accountability is absent, unresolved feelings accumulate. These unresolved emotions create tension that slowly erodes emotional trust. Continuous emotional care ensures that emotional wounds are addressed rather than ignored, preserving emotional safety within the marriage. Emotional safety is essential for vulnerability, and vulnerability sustains emotional closeness. Marriage demands effort even during emotionally uneventful periods. Emotional maintenance is not only necessary during conflict or crisis, it is equally important during calm phases. Consistent emotional attentiveness prevents emotional stagnation and reinforces emotional intimacy. When partners remain emotionally engaged, the relationship stays dynamic rather than predictable. Emotional maintenance keeps connection alive by preventing emotional complacency. Without continuous emotional emotional maintenance, marriage risks becoming functional rather than fulfilling. Love transforms into duty, and connection becomes assumed rather than experienced. Emotional neglect does not mean lack of care, it means lack of presence. Marriage thrives when emotional effort is ongoing, intentional, and responsive, ensuring that emotional connection remains strong even as time, stress, and routine attempt to weaken it.